Alrighty. See. Good morning. Good morning. See, folks are still joining. Well, good afternoon. I hear the bells ringing in the background. I don't know if you all can. Okay, great. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead. Just so everyone knows, this event is being recorded. And will be posted to the Tide Shift social media pages as well as our YouTube page when the event is finished. All right. So, hey Albert, yes, please let us know where you're from in the chat. Please utilize the chat function if you have any questions or if you can't hear anything that I'm saying, or if I'm frozen and my face looks really weird, please let me know. But with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Kaylin Richards. I'm the Associate Director here at Tide Shift Justice Project. I was involved with the Clean Slate work from the very beginning, back in, was that about 2020 at this point? Um, Senator Darius Brown had introduced the Clean Slate bill, and I was a part of the Clean Slate Coalition that helped organize around the bill. We helped organize expungement clinics. We talked to impacted communities. And so I really got a good understanding of how important this legislation is. And so, with no further ado, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about why we're here before I pass it to the panelists to give us a 1 to 2 sentence introduction about who they are and what they do. So, as you all may know, when the Clean Slate Act passed in 2021, an estimated over 290,000 Delawareans with over 590,000 cases qualified for expungements under the Act. The law went into effect August 1st, 2024, and from then through December 31st, 2025, Delaware only cleared 26,601 records for 2025 automatic expungements. The rate of automatic expungements being processed up through December 31st, 2025 was very slow. So slow, in fact, that it would take us over 20 years just to get through the backlog that existed at the time the Clean Slate Act was passed back in 2021, let alone any newly eligible cases. As a comparison point, when our neighbor to the north, Philadelphia, or I'm sorry, Pennsylvania, although some people will say Philadelphia is its own state, the state of Pennsylvania passed an extremely similar Clean Slate Act, and it expunged 34 million cases in the first year of implementation. And so, if you are an attorney, we're going to show you a code throughout this event so that you can go ahead and scan it and be sure to get your CLE credits. We will show one later on and ask that you fill out the form you'll see linked in the chat with the 2 codes and your bar number in order to get credit for attending. Miriam's going to put the link in the chat. Alrighty. So now that we know why we're all here, it's time to pass it to our amazing panelists. And when I call on your name, please tell us who you are and in 2 to 3 sentences, tell us what you do and why you're here. And I'm going to start with Matt Rosen since you are off mute.
Thank you. I'm Matt Rose. I'm Director of Research at the Governor's Office, and part of what I do is government efficiency, which is why I'm on this project. And I'm also on this project because back in the day, my first job in Delaware was starting up the Apex program. So very familiar with this area, and I love being able to help people get their records cleared, and that's why I care very deeply about this. So, yep.
Thanks, Matt. And so I'm going to pass it to Jasmine to go next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Haas. I'm policy advisor to the governor, primarily on issues pertaining to criminal justice, public safety, and immigration.
Thanks, Jasmine. Renata?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renata Kowalczyk. I am the inaugural CEO of Wilmington Alliance, and I'll talk a little bit more about us when we get to questions.
Thanks, Renata. Roxanne?
Hi, everybody. I'm Roxanne Blake, and I am Director of Finance at Friendship House, and I help people get expungements pretty much a lot.
All right. Well, we can't wait to talk to you, Roxanne.
Oh, great.
And last but certainly not least, Alana, tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Alana Farber. I am the head attorney in the post disposition unit at the Office of Defense Services, which is the public defender's office. We One of the large pieces of work our unit does is to review eligibility for individuals who are seeking second chance relief through expungements and pardons, and try to guide them through the process.
Thanks, Alana. Well, I'm going to stay here with you to help us all get an understanding of what is an expungement.
So, sure. Expungement is basically in Delaware, because it can mean different things in different states. But in Delaware, it is basically, in lay terms, complete record clearance. So what that means is the destruction of all indicia or indicators that an arrest ever occurred. And it's destruction of those records to the point where they are not searchable in any court databases or most law enforcement databases.
Thank you. And so, can you tell folks what's the difference between a pardon and an expungement? They're often confusing, and folks don't know the difference between the two.
Absolutely. So they're related. They're both forms of second chance relief. An expungement, like I said, is complete destruction of, all the records related to someone's arrest or criminal case. A pardon, on the other hand, is a a process through which someone can seek forgiveness through the executive branch. So through the Board of Pardons and the governor's office. And if you're granted a pardon, that is notated on your official record, right? It says pardoned. It indicates that you received that forgiveness, but it does not take the case away off your record. You would still need to go through the expungement process in order to completely remove the case off your record.
Thank you for that. And so can you talk a little bit about, or maybe just list out the different types of expungements, and then I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the mandatory expungement and how, that is tied to the Clean Slate Act, which is why we're all here today.
Yeah, definitely. So, under the code, there are I would say, two major buckets of expungement: mandatory expungement and discretionary expungement. Someone who is eligible for a mandatory expungement means that their record must be cleared. So their case, their arrest, whatever it is, must be cleared. And the agencies that take care of that for adults are the State Bureau of Identification, and for juveniles are family court, for juvenile cases. A discretionary expungement is a type of proceeding where someone prepares and files a petition to the court, where the court is given discretion over whether to grant or clear someone's record. So in mandatory expungement situations, we usually, people who are typically eligible for mandatory expungements are those who, had cases terminated in their favor, so dropped, null pros dismissed, or lower level misdemeanors, for the most part, that might be very old, or, be several years old. For discretionary expungements, it's kind of everything else. So it's most of, more major cases that, where a conviction was garnered. And that's why, the discretion is put in the hands of the court whether or not to grant that expungement when someone petitions for it.
Got it. And so it's to my understanding that when the Clean Slate Act passed in 2021, the list of charges that would be eligible for an automated expungement are essentially the charges that are eligible for mandatory expungement today.
That's exactly right. So, when the Clean Slate Act passed in 2021, and then when it came into effect, at least under the code on, I think, August 1st of
Oh,
2024.
are you kidding me? Oh, sorry.
Um, when it came into effect, August 1st of 2024, that essentially rendered all cases eligible for mandatory expungement also eligible for automatic expungement. So basically, we're to the point where they someone eligible for mandatory expungement would no longer have to proactively go to SBI and request their mandatory expungement through them, and a juvenile wouldn't proactively have to go to family court and request expungement there. It was supposed to happen automatically as a result of the Clean Slate Act.
Got it. And so if the Clean Slate Act were up and running correctly and we were, as efficient as our neighbors in Pennsylvania right now, no one would need to apply for a mandatory expungement because it would be automated. So we want you all to get a sense of, these are, I want to say, some of the lowest level offenses that are eligible for mandatory expungement. Cases that are null pros, like Alana said, and so we have Roxanne here that has experience with the expungement process. She has experience helping people through the process. And so I'm going to go to her and I'm going to ask you, Roxanne, if you can share a little bit about how living with a record has impacted your life. And you're on mute.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Yeah. So I do have a past. My past is 30 years old. I've gone through many processes, and I've always hesitated to explore other employment because where I work, they've helped me, through the years and helped me get my life on track. And, I just always felt comfortable to stay where I'm at. And, so I never really, I was scared because of my background, and as I would get background checks, all this stuff would come up. So like in 2006, I did get a pardon from Ruth Ann Minner, and and that was all great. And I didn't really know about the expungement process until a friend of mine needed an expungement, and I said, well, let's go to the Apex program, and we'll sit in a seminar and listen to it. And I thought, oh my God, this is something that I could do, right? And so we applied for a pardon, and in 2017, and I got rejected. I got denied.
Oh, the
Right.
expungement you applied for in 2017.
Right.
Yeah.
And I got denied. And it was right before, like, they changed some laws where they would pardon everything. So I had felonies that they wouldn't pardon, so they didn't pardon, or they wouldn't expunge anything because I had felonies that were pardoned. And that those laws all changed like shortly after I received this letter. So it did say that eventually I could reapply. And so what happened was the Friendship House, we formed a strategic partnership with another company, and then we have a parent company that's being formed. And I really got nervous because I'm director of finance, and I really didn't. Sorry. Of course, the doorbell's going to ring and the dog's going to bark. um, I didn't. I started getting nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen with this parent company. What were they going to look at? Were they going to pull everybody's background checks? So I work closely with the Department of Defense. So I reached out, and they helped me, apply for a new expungement, right?
Wow.
And yeah, so that's, but mine is not a mandatory expungement. Mine's a discretionary expungement because I have felonies, I guess. I don't know. Something's wrong there. Elena could talk more on why, but she's the one that helped me go through that process. And I'm starting to feel a little bit better about my job. It hasn't come through yet, but it's in the process. So that's how I got here.
Well, I just want to say, Roxanne, I'm sure the Friendship House is very happy and lucky to have you for this long, and I'm sure they wouldn't want you to go anywhere. But
Thank
I
you.
think you brought up a great point about, the limitations and the barriers of just like when you're living with a record, versus someone that's not living with a record, you feel more free to do certain things when you don't have that record kind of looming over
Sure,
your head like a dark cloud.
sure.
Um, and so before we get to the update, like about how Clean Slate is going and where we're looking towards in the future, I really want to turn to Renata. Renata, you are very active in this Second Chances space. Wilmington Alliance, you all co-host multiple expungement clinics and so forth. So can you tell us a little bit about how are you guys showing up in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wilmington Alliance was created in August of 2019 to partner with community, civic, and business leaders to prioritize cities' highest needs to drive economic opportunity and social vitality. Um, all three areas of our work, which are workforce development, entrepreneur and small business support, as well as creative placemaking, are all therefore focused on economic mobility. And I always love being part of the conversations where I actually get to be with my partners, right? Because Wilmington Alliance, it's all about partnering. So we partner with ODS. As a matter of fact, right now, there are office hours that ODS is hosting that bring expungement to the West Central City community in one of our properties at the corner of 7th and Washington. Friendship House has been our partner since 2020. And that's really where our journey started. It was in late 2020 when JP Morgan Chase approached us about leading the Second Chance Employment Collaborative. They were the main funder of the initiative. So we brought a lot of partners together. And this is where we really started digging into what are the barriers that are potential reason for such a high unemployment rates. Because by the way, the unemployment rates in Wilmington and Delaware before COVID were higher than national and going up, right? So that kind of took us on the journey of asking ourselves, how might we be really part of a solution? Um, so since 2020, in addition to leading the Second Chance Employment Collaborative, um, we, as a partner member of what it's used to be called the National Fund for Workforce Solutions, and now it's called Shift Work Forward, we advocate for first chance hiring or second chance hiring at the national level. I serve, been appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors Community Advisory Council for the 3-year term. So twice a year, I get to go to DC and talk about the need of expanding our labor market by expunging records. We partner, you mentioned, Kaylin, that we've done expungement fairs. We bring now ODS to the neighborhood. Um, we were the second seed of the Fines and Fees Fund, which is housed at Friendship House.
Mhm.
The first one was all well known to us, Lynn. And we now lead an employment pipeline for Christiana Care. And Christiana Care Employment Pipeline, it's 100% focused on justice impacted job seekers. And as a matter of fact, the very first individual with the record that got to on probation and parole that got to be employed and passed the 1-year employment at Christiana Care came to us to Friendship House.
Wow. So you mentioned Christiana Care is a second chance employer, meaning they hire people with records.
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of what other businesses or industries in Delaware are leading the way in second chance hiring?
Yeah, sure. I'll start a little bit for framing with the national picture because I think it's really important to see that what's happening in Delaware in terms of industries and employers, it's grounded in a national movement. That 5 years ago, um, the Second Chance Business Coalition was created. And I counted this morning because I was curious how many employers had jumped on board to sign on to be committed to fair chance or second chance hiring, and there are 27 of them, right? So nationally, the key industries that hire folks with records are retail, um, followed by technology. So, Best Buy's, Home Depot, etc., technology, Microsoft, Apple, healthcare. Um, but there are also notable industries that have always been opened. And oftentimes it's the first place of employment that folks go to when they are released, and that's hospitality. Construction also leads nationally, as well as in Delaware. So in Delaware, and the industries and the businesses that have opened doors to second chance are definitely construction, manufacturing and warehousing, um, some technology employers. Christiana Care has worked with us for the last 3 years to remove barriers as well. Um, the challenge has been that we have such a large population of individuals who are, and that's my language, are sitting on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And on another side of the equation, if we're talking about labor ecosystem, are the high growth, high demand industries that are all highly regulated. So I think that's the opportunity for us to figure out how to remove the barriers so that individuals can fully participate in our growing industries in Delaware.
And so, before we pass it to Jasmine and Matt, and thanks for that, Renata, I want to stick with you for a second. Can you talk about what consequences could Delaware face if clean slate expungements are not fully automated and the Clean Slate Act continues to, operate very slowly?
The consequences are economic. So here's the situation that we find ourselves in the state of Delaware. Um, our population has increased. However, the main source of increase in our population are retirees. We are the fourth oldest state in the country. We also have a low labor participation rate, more than 50%. So if we match on one side that we are aging, and I'm approaching that age when I'm beginning to really worry who is going to work on the tax base and who's going to be there to provide services and products that I want to use, right? So if we have on one hand aging population and a lower rate participation, by the way, the unemployment rate is the lowest among men ages from 16 to 24 in the state of Delaware. So if we have a low participation rate, then we need to ask ourselves, where are the opportunities? Where are the groups that can be activated and introduced back into the labor market, right? So when I think about consequences, I think specifically about the impact on the business communities. It's hard for me to use this distorted.
Uh, hmm. I think I can hear you just fine. How about the
Okay.
other? Okay, we can hear you. David, let us know if that problem continues. It may be an issue with your service, but Renata, keep talking and we'll see if we
Yeah,
can hear
yeah.
it. Oh, they
Um,
said it is hard to hear you, Renata. Maybe speak up a little if you
yeah,
can.
sure. Um, so I think the main consequence is that we will not have enough workers if we actually are going to be on the trajectory of having such a large percentage of Delawareans not being able to fully participate in the labor market.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Renata, and thank you all for the work that you do, and you as well, Roxanne. You all at the Roxanne, you rock. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
Thanks.
But thank you all for the work that you do. And so now I want to turn it over to Jasmine and Matt from the governor's office. Obviously, the Clean Slate Act passed under the Carney administration, and the 3 years to prepare for implementation, as well as the first 6 months of implementation, fell under your predecessor's administration. Your office has now been in charge with Clean Slate implementation for a little over a year now. What has been the problems with getting implementation up to speed?
Thanks for the question, Caitlin, and I'll take this one. I'd like to start by acknowledging what everyone here already feels and believes, I think, which is that where we are with Clean Slate right now is completely unacceptable. Our office fully agrees on this, and we're very firm that this needs to be solved urgently. I do also want to say personally, like I said, I started the Apex program way back in 2012. It was my first job at the state of Delaware. I worked really, really hard to set up that program and make it as easy as possible for our clients to apply for a pardon or an expungement. And really what motivated me was, I sat these folks one-on-one, helping them through the process. I saw what an incredible impact getting an expungement or a pardon can have on someone's life. I've seen how it empowers regular people, really good people, really solid people who are just trying to find a job or get a housing so they can live decently, earn a good living, and support their family. Like I've seen that firsthand. Like I said, like a lot of us say, your record doesn't define you, and I've seen that from the clients I've worked with. These are amazing people, and whatever it says on their record, that's not who they are. It's that same understanding that motivates me to work hard to fix this problem right now because I know how important it is to people. It pains me that we're not further along on this, that there's still thousands of people out there who desperately need these expungements that don't have them. So, you asked, what are the problems with getting implementation up to speed? There are a lot of reasons. The top reason is that why we're here right now is this process needs leadership. It needs leadership because there's a lot of different agencies involved. Dell just has SBI, the courts, DOJ, and others. For something like Clean Slate to work, those entities have to move and change in a coordinated way. And that kind of coordination, it doesn't just happen on its own. It requires clear ownership and leadership. And as we delved into this issue, we realized like this leadership needs to come from the governor's office. Unfortunately, that wasn't happening before we came into office. There wasn't someone in a position of authority bringing people to the table, working through those differences and driving a unified approach. And we realized we need to be one to take that on. And that's been a major focus for us, stepping into that coordinating role and working through these core issues, the core issues of transitioning away from a manual case-by-case system to automation at scale, resolving differences in how eligibility and legal requirements are being interpreted, and making sure everyone has the technology we need to carry out their responsibilities. So we're not where we want to be yet. We're quite behind where we want to be, but we are focusing intensely on this. We're moving towards getting alignment, defining a path forward that can actually deliver expungement at scale. Yeah.
And thanks for that. Thanks for that clarity. So you had mentioned that there are a number of agencies involved with implementation, which I understand can be quite difficult. You have to give everyone time and, an opportunity to share their thoughts and suggestions and things of that nature. But it is to my understanding that there are certain agencies that are having, I want to say, more issues with others in terms of implementation. And so, can you talk a little bit about how's the governor's office going to ensure that these agencies, and I'm just going to say the name, SBI, seems to be the folks who are not, I want to say, are not helping things move along fast. So can you talk about, how are you going to ensure that these agencies actually comply with the law?
Mhm.
Well, not you in particular, Matt, but the
Sh-
governor's office. You know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah. And I wouldn't phrase it the exact way you said it. I think it's a little more complicated than that. But What I would say is that SBI has many concerns that we're working to fully understand and comprehend, and we're examining them and working to address them with SBI, with the other entities involved. Just like all entities who are involved in the clean slate process have concerns that need to be addressed. Um, you know, in SBI's case, those concerns revolve primarily around, being able to accurately determine which cases are eligible for clean slate and being able to catch mistakes, because that's their responsibility. You know, these concerns should have been addressed years ago by people with the authority to address them. A path forward should have been determined. That never happened, so we're dealing with it now. But I shouldn't dwell too much on who did what or who didn't do what. I think it's more useful to focus on what needs to happen to move this forward and what we're doing to make that happen. We are in persistent and direct communication with SBI as well as other agencies and entities involved in this process. We're working through differences one by one. We're driving towards resolutions that will make this clean slate process work while protecting public safety and empowering SBI to do their job of making sure that the people who are getting clean slate expungements are the ones who are legally eligible for it, the ones who are supposed to get it. But the reality is that the current process still relies too heavily on manual review. And it's making things move too slow. And that is the core issue, really, that we are working with SBI on to change safely and legally. They're engaging with us on that process, and they're working through it with us. And we expect to have some breakthroughs soon.
Mm. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that I think is a little, worrisome for me as someone that has been in this space,
Yeah.
is the fact that Clean Slate Act was supposed to, and it makes mandatory expungements free. So the
Mhm.
current cost of a mandatory expungement, which are the charges that are eligible for a clean slate expungement, it
Mhm.
costs around $150.
Yeah.
Part of that fee is for fingerprints, and then another part of that
Mhm.
is for the mandatory application fee. But under Clean Slate, the idea is that these expungements will now be free and folks don't have
Yeah.
to go get their fingerprints done. They don't have to fill out the application. And so I want to bring up this stat that we discovered through a FOIA request.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to go to you, Roxanne, to get your thoughts about this. So Tide Shift, we got some data through a FOIA request about how many mandatory expungements SBI processed in the last year, which is 2025. And we found that over 1,100 expungements, which amounted to almost $85,000 in mandatory expungement fees, uh were collected. Roxanne is someone that, you work with, people who are seeking an expungement and who oftentimes don't have the fees to cover this. Can you speak to why this is like so concerning that, we're still collecting $85,000 from our most vulnerable population here today?
Yes. So Friendship House, we partner with the Defense, the Office of Defense, and we also partner with Wilmington Alliance. And we use those fees to help people get their fingerprints and their background, and then send off to the state police. And I'm really wondering, why are we doing that? Like, we could use that money for other reasons. So since 2024, we have helped 48 people get their background check, their fingerprints. Um, 29 of them have gotten mandatory expungements. I'm figuring I send a lot of people to the Office of Defense because they don't qualify for a mandatory expungement. Some people maybe don't follow through. So in total, we've spent $3,456 just in fingerprints, and we've spent $2,175 sending to the state police.
Wow. And
Um,
so, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. So like I'm wondering like if we're going to give people background. So I'm really confused. It really confuses me that we are spending this money if it's supposed to be automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could be using this money for some other things, like to help people with their IDs or their birth certificates or, just other things.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, if they're eligible for a mandatory expungement, why are you taking the fee?
Mm-hmm.
So so that's the question.
Yeah.
That's what's really bothering me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And if Roxanne, if I can, I'm gonna go back to the governor's office because Matt mentioned that they were resolving this in a timely manner, which I wholeheartedly believe. And I was wondering if you guys had a deadline that you could possibly share with the people on when we can expect Clean Slate to be operating um, at its full capacity or functionality, I should say.
Yeah. Um, our deadline is yesterday. I mean, it was months ago, 2 years ago, really. I mean, in our minds, we're just way past the deadline, and we're just urgently rushing to get this done as quickly as possible. Um, I don't want to keep throwing everything on the last administration. That's part of it. I admit that when we first started, we didn't understand the depth of this issue, the complexity, how far we'd have to dig, and how much time and energy we would have to spend sorting this out, how long it would take to answer the questions, the differences between all the parties. So we've upped our efforts, we've intensified them because we came to a point where we realized we're not making enough progress on this issue. We need to intensify our efforts, spend a lot more time on it, do a lot more research, really get in the weeds, find out what's going on here, and again, push towards a resolution. Wish we had done that sooner, but we're doing that now. We're realizing that the progress on this issue hasn't gone fast enough, and that we need to intensify our efforts, and we're doing that. We're pushing very hard for a resolution and a path forward as quickly and urgently as possible.
And so now we've heard from your office that there are 225,000 cases eligible for expungement that the state could expunge if the state just metaphorically pushed a button. It's set up to go. Can you tell us a little bit about why that hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the short answer is, there's hundreds of thousands of cases in that queue, but not everyone is fully aligned and confident that those are the right cases.
And who's everyone? Sorry.
Um, I think there's some from what SBI has seen, they're expressed concerns about the accuracy of that. Uh, There may be others who have that concerns too. I'm not sure, perhaps DOJ or the courts. So it might not just be SBI. And we're digging into that, and we're seeing what the truth is there. I think it seems like there's at least they're at least partly right about some things, and we're just trying to sort out get everyone on the same set of facts and figure it all out. So, uh, you know, right now we have the ability to generate a very large set of potentially eligible cases, which is a major step forward, but we need all the entities in the system to be confident that these cases actually meet the legal criteria for clean slate. And that alignment really matters. To move at scale, we need to be confident we're doing it correctly and consistently. So the work right now is making sure that we have the right criteria being used to identify those cases, that criteria is agreed on, and can be relied on without manual review. It's making sure that there continues to be a way, even as we automate, to check for potential errors and correct errors if needed. And that's what turns this list of cases into something that can be acted on at scale. And we're making progress. We're driving towards a resolution on this as quickly as possible. We're not at full alignment yet, but we're getting there. We're going to get there as quickly as possible and get to that point where we can be pressing play on this.
Got it. And so I appreciate that update. Like you said, I agree. I think, this thing could have been handled yesterday, if we had done what we, had to do initially.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of focus on the future a little bit. Um, so one of the things that, I often hear advocates and, my friends at the National Clean Slate Initiative talk about is this idea of notification. How are we planning to notify people
That's
when
right.
their record has been expunged automatically?
Mhm.
And so I want to open that up to Jasmine and Matt as you guys have
Mhm.
been, hands-on with the implementation process. Does the governor's office have any plans right now for notification?
So that's a really tough problem. And from my understanding, is that other states that do clean slate do not provide notifications, and there's a good reason for that. It's because how do you know that that notification only goes to the intended person? Again, the point here is to make sure that these records get hidden from anyone other than the person who it pertains to. So there's a great danger that you mail a notification to someone. How do we know they live at that address? Or how
Mm.
do we know that their landlord's not going to see it? Or someone else who they don't want to see. So, you know, you really need to be careful there because we're helping people. You don't want to do harm. You only want to help. So it's a really tricky subject, and generally it doesn't happen in other states. I don't know if there's a really good solution to that, other than yeah, people checking on their own to make sure they've gone in expungement. So it's a really thorny problem. I wish there was some way to do that. It's just there's no real magic wand to my knowledge to make sure that that notification only gets to that person and no one else.
Got it. And so I actually want to stay here with you really quickly because
Mhm.
you you reminded me that I wanted to give you all space to talk about what lessons have you guys learned from implementation and, being hands-on with it. What lessons can you give to, let's say, another state that's trying to implement Clean Slate? What lessons did you all take away?
Is that for us or
Yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's for the folks who
okay?
are in charge of implementation. Sorry, Jasmine.
Yeah, I'll just say I think definitely the importance of like coordination from the get-go, with all relevant stakeholders to ensure that there is like a shared understanding of what is required and what the path forward is.
Absolutely.
And I will say, you know, uh, Kaylin, you and your colleagues at Tide Shift, I mean, you're doing a great job of zeroing in on the implementation, and that's what's really important. It's not enough to pass legislation and then pat each other on the back and say our work here is done.
Mhm.
The devil's in the details, and implementation is tremendously important. So, really want to give you all credit for seeing this through and looking at what's going on and pushing everyone involved, pushing us to implement this correctly.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Matt. And I appreciate you give me the perfect transitions. So you talked about how, the buck does not stop at implementation. And although, we're currently working on it, we're hoping to have things fully up and running in the near future. But I want to look even past implementation, which may be hard right now. But let's try. So as someone that has been doing this work for years, I've noticed that there are several barriers with obtaining an expungement, whether it's mandatory, automated, discretionary. The current law says that if you owe outstanding fines and fees, or if you are currently on probation, or if you have pending cases, you are completely barred from receiving an expungement. And one of the things, the reason why I wanted to ask this is because really quickly, I had a young lady who came to me looking for an expungement, and she would have been eligible for a mandatory expungement because the case was terminated in her favor. She claimed she was innocent and she maintained it, and the judge dropped the charges. And she couldn't receive an expungement because she was on probation. And the probation she was serving it for a pretty lengthy time. But now she has this new charge on her record that she can't get expunged because she's on probation. Very heartbreaking stuff. And so I guess I want to open this up to the floor, to the entire panel to give us a sense of how do you guys feel about these specific barriers? Like, do you all think outstanding fines and fees, someone's probation status, having pending charges, do you think that should prevent someone from obtaining an expungement, especially from like an expungement of null pros cases, cases that were terminated in their favor? Who wants to go? Sorry, I'm asking the hard questions at the end. I'll take it. You know what? I say no, they should not be a barrier, for the reasons that I just stated. So, to give you guys a sense of where where this client was, her eyes were looking to the future. She wanted to apply for a new job, because it was her job that actually wrongfully accused her of committing the offense. And so she had a new job opportunity lined up, but she knew they were going to do a background check and she wanted to get this case expunged and she couldn't.
I mean, I'll add something here, which is that I remember like over a decade ago, I was involved in efforts to expand expungement eligibility. Back then, the only way you could get an expungement without getting a pardon was if all the charges on your record were terminated in favor of the accused, that they're all nolli pros. Um, Even if you have a nolli pros case and another conviction in other case, you couldn't get that nolli pros case expunged. And so I was involved in those efforts, and it took a while, but eventually they were successful at expanding expungement eligibility. And there were multiple bills. It wasn't just one bill; it was one after another and after another. And so, just like I said before, you can't pass legislation and then not pay attention to implementation. You can't pass legislation and then never think you have to pass another bill again. I think this is something we need to keep evaluating and think about what's the next bill that we need to keep refining this and making sure that the people who should have access to expungement have access to it. So I think the fight needs to keep going, and we need to keep looking into this. And it's never going to be perfect, and there's always ways to make it better. So yeah, so we should
And
keep pushing for that.
And I brought that up because our neighbor, Pennsylvania, also, learned a tough lesson when they initially passed their clean slate law in, I believe, 2018. They did not remove the provision from their law that barred people who owed fines and fees from being eligible for this relief. And so they had to go back years later. I believe 2 to 3 years later, they went back after realizing we are excluding thousands of people from clean slate expungement simply because they owe fines and fees. And so I wonder if the office of the governor is able to commit to working with others to remove fines and fees as a barrier to expungement.
Yeah, I think we're very open to having. Well, actually, I'll toss this over to Jasmine because she's more in charge of the policy side.
I was just gonna say thanks, Matt. That we're definitely happy to look into this further with advocates and like explore this option. And yeah, I think that we are in the camp of where we can reduce those barriers. We'd like to, but I would like to explore that more closely.
Thanks, Jasmine. And so before we turn to questions from the audience, I just want to remind folks, if you are an attorney, there is a link in the chat that you can click to fill out the form so you can get your CLE credits. Alrighty. And so we do have some questions in the chat. We also have some questions that were sent in advance. And so I'm going to start with the questions that were sent in advance while I, scrub through the chat to see if there's any good questions that we can ask. Um, so I'm going to open this up to anyone. But what can average citizens do to help advance expungement processing so people are not waiting years for an expungement or have to pay uh, for their own criminal background checks to verify their expungement has occurred?
I'm happy to take this one, at least in part. Office of Defense Services, my office, does have an online portal where we have people who are interested in learning about, say, have I been one of the lucky people to have gotten that automatic expungement I was supposed to get or not? With they People put in their information, click the consents to allow us to access that information, and then we can provide that answer for free. So that you don't have to go get fingerprinted, over and over and over again, $72 a pop to see if your record's been cleared yet. So we can provide that information, and we get thousands of requests yearly to do that. And I personally pretty much go through all those records, and then we have a team of people that then gets back to those applicants, just so we can give them that information. And then if there are next steps, we advise on next steps.
Mm, thank you for that, Alana. And we have a really good question from Andrew in the chat. When a conviction is expunged, are the records completely destroyed or just segregated?
I can take that too. That's I guess, an answer as to involving the statutory language and the procedure. The governor's office might have some insight here as well. But my understanding is, I mean, the statutory language does call for one of the ways an expungement can happen is destruction. But in practice, and I've never seen this actually happen from point A to point F, in practice, the court the language says that the records are placed in the control of SBI and shall only be disclosed for lawful purposes. Lawful purposes have has been interpreted to mean if someone's applying for a law enforcement job or they're under investigation, and those records might in some way relate. So it's a very limited set of reasons for which those records can be disclosed. And that's why they're not searchable by, the a member of the public, and they are taken out of the control of the court entirely, and placed in the control of SBI. Where they are kept in, I do not know. I imagine it's some large secret vault somewhere, but I don't know.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. Going through the chat now. Matt and Jasmine, this question is for you, and it's actually from your fellow panelist, Roxanne. Roxanne wants to know, is there an order that they are going in, to process the automatic expungements? So is there a certain order you're following, Matt, Jasmine?
So there is the current order that is being processed. I don't think there's a real order right now. We are looking into the possibility of creating a sort of order, because creating an order might make it easier to expunge more records at once. Again, as I mentioned, working out these differences, in terms of legal interpretation and eligibility, we're looking into, are there big subsets of this multi-hundred thousand set of cases where it's easier to get everyone in agreement, maybe do all those first, get them done real quick, 50,000, 100,000, however, then we move on to the next ones and tackle those. So we're looking into that as a possibility. But right now, as I understand, I don't think there's a particular order that I'm aware of, but I could be wrong.
Hmm, got it. Okay. Thank you. We have some comments in the chat. A phased approach makes sense. Yes, yes. Um, got it. Albert, we just put the code in the chat again. Let us know if you're still having trouble finding it. I'm gonna go to I think we have time for one last question. This one says, as an employer in the temp to hire industry, we see so many backgrounds get rejected for employment. I provide the resources to candidates for the Apex program as much as possible. What else can we collectively do to help? Are there other resources available to assist these job seekers who have urgent needs to obtain employment and a stable income? I'm wondering if uh, Renata, would you be interested in talking a little bit about how Wilmington Alliance helps prepare people to like re-enter the workforce?
Yeah, yeah, and we do this with several partners, right? For example, we are not intentionally a training provider, but to answer a question directly, the work is directly with the employers. It is the employers that when they make a commitment to open the doors to what sometimes they call non-traditional job seekers, but specifically, for example, with Christiana Care, they named individuals who are justice impacted, including those on probation and parole. So we work with Christiana Care to even build a list of what are the criminal situations that we should not even consider sending a candidate. And they had to create a separate door to enter to Christiana Care, because if you apply through a standard online application, you will be rejected. So we've built a separate access point, something that, by the way, my former employer, JP Morgan Chase, when we wanted candidates that were non-traditional, for example, veterans or women returning to workforce after 10 or more years of not working, we didn't send them through the standard online application door. We created a separate door where the HR individual knows that these folks have already a situation. Let's talk about it. Let's
Smart.
figure out, what have you learned? What can this be incorporated into your work situation? Because to Matt's earlier point, this is really about creating opportunities for everyone in the state of Delaware. So my perspective is we need to spend diligent, intentional time with employers, helping them figure out their own internal HR and hiring practices to open the doors.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't know that you guys created that separate avenue. That is genius.
Yep.
Thank you so much for all that you do again. And so to close us out, I want to turn it back to Roxanne Blake, the star of the show, you know. I Roxanne, your story is just so inspiring. You are such a badass in everything that you do. And I was wondering if if you could give folks some maybe some advice on, how do you navigate this experience? How do you maintain a successful career like you have? Like how do you do that?
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry to ask you that in the last minute, but you have about 45 seconds.
Okay, so I definitely think it's worth it to get an expungement. I mean, if anybody can clear their record and it just goes away, that would be totally awesome. So that a lot of our people that go through our program, they need employment, they need housing, and sometimes it's really hard for us to get that for them because they have this this background, and it's really hard to get housing. Um, I suggest that everyone take the resources that we have available to go through the workshops that the Office of Defense puts on, or go to the Apex program and go through them. I think all those programs are great, and I would suggest it's worth it for anybody to get this expungement. it's worth it. You know, to to be eligible to get employment without being turned away because your record isn't the right record. That's all I got. Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks for believing in me. Thank you.
Of course, and clearly I'm not the only one that believes in you, Roxanne. I don't think the Friendship House will run without you.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and so I really do appreciate you and the conversations that we've had leading up to this panel. Can everyone give the panelists a round of applause, although I can't see you, maybe in
Yeah.
spirit. And apologies again for everyone that's popping up as Kaylin Richards. I'm not a narcissist. I don't want everyone to be named Kaylin. It was a technical error, I guess. And so, thank you guys so much for attending. We will go ahead and post this on our social media pages and send you guys a link to the recording in the near future. But thank you guys so much, Roxanne, Alana, Matt, Renata, Jasmine. Thank you guys, and thanks to Lynn and Miriam for controlling the chat. It's
Thank you
pretty
all.
crazy in there. All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks,
Bye
guys.
now.
Thank you.